Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business. Well, welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. My name is Jane Atkinson. I'm the author of the Wealthy Speaker 2.0 and the Epic Keynote. The topic of today's podcast is boosting your bookings using social media. I'm so excited. Our guest expert is Erin Gargan. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you, Jane.
I am so happy that you've taken the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. Let me just give everybody a brief overview of your world. Erin Gargan is an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and digital persuasion expert. She is CEO of Socialite Agency, a social media firm whose clients include the Oscars, ABC Disney, Visa, Hitachi, and others. She's the author of Digital Persuasion, Sell Smarter in the Modern Marketplace, a book that everybody's going to need to get as soon as it hits the market. Erin has been featured in Forbes and was recently named a 2017 Woman in Business by the Orange County Business Journal. Erin helps sales, marketing, and event professionals attract attention and increase influence using the power of digital persuasion. Woohoo! Erin, let's dive right in. What do you think? Okay, we're talking about professional speakers on the Wealthy Speaker Show. What do you think some of the mistakes that speakers make when doing social media?
Some of the mistakes that speakers make when they are running their social media campaigns, in my opinion, is that they don't remember that social media is really just putting a microphone and a spotlight around who they are as a person. So there's a lot of automation happening right now in the social media space. And I just think that a lot of speakers can probably do a better job at just being more authentic and really coming across as who they are. And, there's kind of, there's a feeling that I've seen on certain speakers' social media channels of trying to be perfect and, trying to be this polished, perfect expert who knows everything and is like the answer. It's very kind of one-way communication, sort of broadcasty.
Right.
And so what I resonate with more as a member of the audience, and what seems to perform better, is when speakers are more focused on having a two-way dialogue with their audience and not always being so worried about being this perfect, polished, immaculate brand on social. Whereas it's okay to be a little more human. It's okay to let that wall down a little bit and even be a little bit vulnerable,
And flawed. Geez, I love somebody who exposes their flaws because I'm so flawed.
Right.
I know that you're part of some of the groups that I do, and I certainly have no problem exposing my flaws because we all have them, right?
Yes. Yeah, and it makes you more relatable. Even I love that story that you shared with me before we actually got on this podcast. You were saying that you were interviewed at a speaker summit, and you didn't know it was going to be on camera. And so lots of female speakers would be just paralyzed with fear of no hair, no makeup, on camera, and you just dove right in, And so that's kind of what people appreciate. They appreciate that authenticity.
Right. Whereas I'm quite sure there'll be others that judge and say, what was she thinking? But anyway, so part of that, let me just ask you a question. I'm seeing a lot of these questions on Facebook and different mediums where people are just asking a question to try to engage their audience. Mm-hmm. And honestly, Erin, I think it's speakers answering other speakers' questions. But let's say you were trying to engage your actual audience. How do you do those in a way that is compelling?
Mm-hmm. The biggest key to success when you're trying to garner user engagement on a question type post, the biggest concept to understand is that the way that we consume social media is very ADD. Not only is our attention pulled in all these different directions on multiple news feeds across 3, 4, sometimes 5 social media platforms, but on top of that, we're very lazy. So users are leaning back and they're playing on social media when they probably should be at work,
Right.
getting things done.
Right.
So understanding that the psychology of your audience is, relaxing, escaping, passing the time, and that their attention is drawn in all these different directions, understanding all of that means that when you craft a question to try and solicit and attract that type of rich dialogue from your community, it's very important that, number one, you touch on a topic that is highly emotional for your audience. So vanilla topics that are just generic, safe, perhaps it's about your content, anything that doesn't make you feel, whether it's extremely entertained or extremely upset, or you want to have a question that is a little uncomfortable, or you want to elicit an emotion, because when we feel, we engage. If we don't feel, we don't engage. That's the first thing. Number two, keeping in mind that we are passive consumption-based users on social, it's very important that you make it very easy for someone to engage. So like the cardinal sin of social media questions is the open-ended question. What do you think about this? It's too broad. People don't feel like coming up with an answer.
We're just too lazy for that.
Too lazy. And so you'll see your engagement quadruple if you give people an A or a B. If you give them a this or this.
So only two options, or should there be 3 or 4 options?
You can do 2 options. 2 options is because it's the highest engagement, because psychologically it's almost like the Vegas slot machine, or voting, or hot or not, or A or B. You have to pay in,
Okay.
So
I love it. I love it. Okay. So do you think that these questions are working in the right situation, in the right scenario? And what mediums do you think that they work best on?
In terms of social media platforms?
Yes, which ones?
So primarily it depends on which platform you have the most engaged audience, right?
Okay.
Like wherever you have a living, breathing, vibrant community, that's where you're going to see the most success. Like, for example, in my community, I'm an Instagram person. So if I'm asking my Instagram audience a question about a picture, I'll typically have a visual along with the question. So I'll do A or B. And the engagement is very high versus what's everyone think about this, or how's everyone doing in regards to this?
Right.
People just kind of want to have to make it up on their own. So that's a helpful way to kind of start to get the ball rolling.
Very helpful. On Instagram, are you posting as yourself or as a social ed agency?
I post as myself.
Okay.
Just because I'm lazy and don't feel like keeping 2 social media accounts, but also because, especially as a speaker, our personal and our professional brands are so blended. People are so interested in where you're traveling and who you're hanging out with and what you care about. They want to identify with you. And I just think, social media has so many pros and so many cons, and that's another conversation in terms of, is it good for society? Is it good for our health and this and that? But one of the positives is that it really does begin to humanize those exchanges around important topics. And when used properly, social media, in my opinion, is the most powerful tool that you can use to actually create a real relationship with your audience.
Right.
And that's why a lot of times I caution against automation, even though automation is a lot easier to kind of set it and forget it. It's kind of like any other relationship, right? Like if you have like
really in it.
Yeah. Like if you have a dear girlfriend from college, right, that you haven't talked to in a long time.
Right.
And you can shoot her a text or comment on her Facebook post. But ultimately, until you jump on a FaceTime or a phone call and have the big chat over a cup of tea or a glass of wine, you just don't get the same level of engagement. You just don't. So social media is very much like real relationships. What you put into it is what you get out of it.
Right.
So it's just up to you how comfortable you are leaning on that platform to grow this feeling of connection that you have with your most loyal audience,
You know,
you
it's
know?
funny, there's been such a big debate. Well, I've heard the debate before in our industry. You know, we're all speakers, and so people taking a photo of the empty room before they go in was considered kind of egotistical or something. And first of all, what other speakers think about what you're doing is not relevant. But what do you think your clients think about that? From a client perspective, how do you view something like that?
So you brought this up at our event that we went to in Phoenix, which was fantastic a couple months ago. And I thought about it for a while after you said that. And I think that social media communication as a speaker really comes down to your intent.
Mm,
Similarly to when you get on stage, one speaker can deliver the exact same message as another speaker, but you know how you can just feel if the speaker
it's
genuinely wants to
authentic.
help you and they
Yes.
genuinely want you to be better. They want to pour their heart and soul and guts out into your brain to make you walk away a better person. You
Mm,
can feel the difference between that and the person who is pontificating from the platform with the
hmm.
same exact message, but they're pounding their chest and don't I sound smart? You can just feel the difference.
Right.
And I think that the same is for social. We are absolutely in a very narcissistic, selfie based world that, in my opinion, needs to do a major swing back somewhere in the middle.
Hmm.
Um, even, and I don't know if you know this is crazy, but I was doing my name change stuff yesterday, and there is an app now where you can actually take a selfie and have it be approved for your United States passport. You can actually take a selfie for your passport. That's how like insane selfie phenomenon has gotten. Like the U.S.
Wow.
government is allowing
I
us
am
to take selfies.
surprised by that. I am
Yes,
so surprised by that.
no kidding. I couldn't believe it. So,
Wow.
um, anyways, yes. So the narcissism's out of control. But if your intent is, for example, like taking, like you said, taking a photo of a large empty place, I do that because when I look at a large empty room before I take the stage,
Hmm.
I'm I'm getting myself pumped
Yeah.
to share and to inspire and to help. And I'm looking at all these seats and I'm just imagining people's hearts and souls and how can we make a movement? How can we have a moment here together? And so my intent is, hey guys, I'm so excited for you to get here.
Yeah.
So I think if that's your intention, I don't know if you can really go wrong.
And don't you think that the event planner, who you, by the way, show how to make the most of their event using social media, don't you think they appreciate that? Don't you think they
Yeah,
appreciate everything that you do to help promote their event?
I do. I do. And to your point, Jane, whether it's the meeting planner, obviously any promotion that you're going to do of their event, they're psyched. So if the haters, which there's always trolls on social media, right? If the haters are other speakers or other people, it's important to keep in mind that there is this phenomenon where whether it's cyberbullying or just some of the insane debates that I've found myself getting caught up in, whether
Hmm.
it's on Quora or LinkedIn groups, there's something about that screen between you and other people
Yeah.
that gives you this false sense of anonymity and empowers you it can empower you positively to, be more vulnerable and break out of your shell and share deeper than you would maybe in person, or it can swing the other way.
Hmm.
And it can be a dark side type of element. So, if people are giving you negative feedback, I think that's just kind of, unfortunately, it's part of the digital age. And most of the time, if people are being unkind to you on social media, it's usually not you. It's usually bigger issues they have with themselves. So
Yeah,
ignore the
exactly.
haters, right?
And really, the bottom line is, what does your client think? That's really the only person that matters, as far as I'm concerned. So hopefully, we can nix that part of the conversation. Okay, your
Absolutely.
book, your book. Tell us about your book. When is it coming out?
It's coming out the last week in August, which
Ooh,
I'm really excited about.
so excited! That's
Yeah.
2017. Digital
Yeah.
persuasion, sell smarter in the modern marketplace. What would you say is your definition of digital persuasion?
So, my definition of digital persuasion is becoming a stronger communicator from behind the screen. So when you're typing or tweeting or texting, how can you become more persuasive, more influential, more effective at attracting attention, increasing your influence, and really selling smarter? So the concept is, persuasion's kind of it's a funny word. Because like if you hear the word persuasion, would you think it has a positive connotation or a negative connotation?
Oh, see, I'm positive, of course, but that's the glass half full person was probably going to go that way, I
Right,
suppose.
right. Right. Okay. So I pulled my social media network, and interestingly enough, about 70% of my network said that they thought persuasion was a positive thing.
Hmm.
And about 30% of my network said they thought it was actually had like undertones of, manipulation
Right.
or things like that. So my whole premise is that that to become a more positive persuader, it's really the idea of having, whether it's the meeting planner or your client or your customer or press or whoever you're trying to attract attention from, perhaps get a meeting with, or perhaps just float ideas by for consideration. Whoever that is, the idea is that you're coming from a place of service and not selling.
Mm.
You're coming from a place of positivity because you're trying to persuade them to give you a chance in a very loud space where everybody is shouting about themselves and everyone is elbowing for attention.
Mm.
So the kind of the concept of the book came out of the fact that I started my career as a salesperson. And I'm really ashamed to admit that I was very pushy and very aggressive. And I was a top salesperson for a a national broadcast television station. And so I went from there to marketing, where I was also very aggressive and very pushy. And then I became a business owner, 10 years ago. And all of a sudden, I found myself on the other side of the table.
Right.
So now, not only was I selling clients and, hustling to get business, but now I was on the other side. I was getting attacked with sales messaging and just hammered with like these wild, just night and day messaging and give me time and give me 5 minutes and give me a meeting. And so what I realized was that this was really annoying, and I couldn't believe that I had been doing this to other people. Like it's just so wrong. And so what I did was I did an exercise. I looked through 1,000 sales messages that I had received as a business owner. And of those 1,000 sales messages, I realized I only responded to about 2% of them.
Mm.
The other 98% I ignored. And when I looked at my success rate reaching out with my same type of style, it was very similar numbers. I only got a response about between 1% and 3% of the time. And so I looked at that 2% of people that I actually responded to, and it was crazy. Like of that 2%, I agreed to meet with more than half of them, and then I bought from about 40% of those people. So
Wow.
really high conversion numbers. And so I started to look for like patterns. What are these people doing from behind a screen that stood out, that digitally differentiated them from the pack and enticed me to give them a chance? And that's what this book is about, is those principles. Because I basically took what they were doing and I started using it. And within 6 months, 6 months to a year, my small little nobody teeny tiny agency in Orange County, we were beating out these massive global agencies for clients like the Oscars and Visa and Hitachi and just all these crazy big clients that we had no business working with, really. But so it's really powerful. And so that's what the book is about.
I love it. I love it. So when you go out and deliver to your audiences, you have a formula for delivering strong digital persuasion. Tell us about that formula.
Okay. The formula is called the pub method. Okay. And the way I remember it, and again, there may be haters listening to this podcast that'll make mean comments on social media, but I am an Irish citizen. I'm a dual citizen, and I love a good glass of wine or a beer here and there. And so growing up in an Irish Catholic crazy family, sometimes we'd head to the pub to solve a problem or two. And so this is the pub method. Okay. It stands for personal, useful, and brief. So the number one part of the pub method is personal. And this is what you were tapping into earlier, Jean, when you said that as long as you're keeping your client top of mind, as long as you're thinking about your meeting planner as your creating social media content, you really can't go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea of personal, is that for this particular audience, for speakers, um, creating content with your event audience in mind and also your meeting planner in mind first. So coming from a place of what's personal to them. And then when it comes to what's personal for you, making sure that you're able to be vulnerable and you're able to be human and not being afraid. Like, for example, one of the best, I took the stage in Vegas, I had a picture of me with no makeup on in my rollers, in my get ready in the bathroom, and I had my little speech and I was practicing it, and it was just this super authentic, like it's 6 a.m. and I have rollers in my hair and I'm getting ready for you guys and I'm so excited, and it got all this engagement because people were like, oh my gosh, this is great, like, I'm at breakfast, look at this person, like this is wild, I love it. So being personal, and I think that.
I
Go
love,
ahead.
can I just add that sometimes I think people go so far to try to think about what the decision maker is thinking that they veer into speaker mode versus expert mode. And so what that looks like is, I know you're planning a meeting and you really just don't want any hassles with your speakers, rather than I'm here to help you solve some of the problems of your organization. So there's kind of speaker positioning and then there's expert positioning. And I think probably a combination of the two might be okay, but I don't want to see people lean just so far, making it so personal that they're just talking about hire me, I'm your person who can solve your problems for your meeting. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. So what do you think? Because you have more experience with meeting planners than I do, obviously. I mean, you're an industry veteran. I'm learning from you every single day. So what do you think meeting planners want to see from speakers on social? Because I'm speaking more to like the audience at your event perspective, but
Right.
I'm curious what you think in terms of what meeting planners like to see on social from speakers.
Well, I think they're probably scanning for information that helps them solve a problem. But I also think that personal, oh yeah, I follow you on Instagram and I saw that you were in this and this and this place. I think they're maybe watching, things that are going on in your world. So I think those personal aspects and the vulnerable things that you're talking about, the curlers in your hair, are great. But I can see where if you were doing, say, an introductory letter, an email to somebody, that if you were saying, I know that your desk is piled high with speaker materials and blah, 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 you're trying to make a decision, I'm your solution because I'm going to do a bang up job. I see that as very different from here are some of the problems and pain points that I know your organization faces. Here's how I hope to be able to solve them. So I'm kind of speaking less about,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're scanning for that in social media, but I probably am talking about a more direct approach with an email or something like that.
So the idea is when you're reaching out to a meeting planner, so the number one thing with being digitally persuasive is to eradicate the use of the word I, which is very powerful. If you can go through your email, you will be shocked at how much you can take out the word I. So not even I know your pain point, I understand what your audience needs, but you can just start right from the get-go with P being personal, starting with a word that draws them in that has to do with them. So if I was trying to get your attention, Jane, I would start with a word. I would say Influence 2017. Tell me you're going. Or I would say
Ah,
Phoenix, Arizona. Heard you had a great event there. I would say something like grandson, darling, saw the photo on Facebook. I would start with something that is highly personal to you, a proper noun, and start right with that. Because if you think about the way that we are trying to get through messages on our phones. We get these notifications all day, right? And you're scanning those first 3, 4, 5 words, and your brain, which is overloaded with stimulation all day with social media and emails and texts and all these things, your brain is trying to make the fastest decision possible. What is this? Is it going to help me? And how fast can I move on? Is it a delete, an ignore, or an answer? You know?
love it. So are you talking in terms of subject lines then?
subject lines,
Okay.
how you're opening your message.
Okay.
I've done a lot of testing with messaging. And what's interesting is a lot of times what works in the real world. So, having rapport and building banter, like, hey, Jane, like, how was your weekend at the lake? And how's your family? Those types of niceties that are very impactful in the real world. When you get online and behind a screen, they actually do the opposite because they're taking someone further away from, I'm trying to understand what you want, if it can help me, and if I can move on.
What do you want?
Like, what do you want?
So we have
Yes.
this old saying in the industry, show up and throw up, which means
Mm.
that the minute somebody emails you, and I get it a lot, people think that I guess, I don't know if they think I'm a bureau or what they think, but anyway, they'll just, Dear Jane, and then they throw up and they give me all of the information that they think I need to know about them. Sometimes it goes on forever. The same thing could happen on LinkedIn. I've added you, I've agreed to add you to my network, and then boom, throw up. So, what about
Yeah,
that?
that is, that is, I have probably, I don't even know how many examples in my book of people showing up and throwing up. I think it's industry agnostic. Um, and it's this whole concept of people are using digital to try and educate you on everything about themselves.
Mm,
They're trying to tell you who they are and what their products and services and what they can solve. And it's all about them. And the concept of
yeah,
being digitally persuasive is starting with personal in terms of your subject and then moving right into the U of the pub method, which is useful.
right.
In the second line, be very clear on what is useful to your recipient. What do they care about specifically? And in today's day and age, there really is no excuse for not researching before you reach out. You can see where Jane's going, what Jane cares about. I mean, just scanning through your posts, your profiles, even just Googling you
Mhm.
can get a great idea of what someone's about and what they really, truly care about. Even looking at event schedules and working backwards from that, looking at their clients, their audience. There are so many clues and nuggets that you can find to craft a simple useful positioning statement that basically says, here's who you are personally, and here's what might be useful to you. And it's just for consideration. It's just for your consideration.
Right. So,
And
what if you
yeah,
said, as a part of that, Erin, if you said, I've noticed that you've had, oh, I'm using the I. I've noticed that you had
there you go.
so and so speak at your uh, X name conference last year, and I think that I might be a good fit. Here's why, something like that. Would that be appropriate?
Right. So, proper nouns to get their attention. So, Jane Atkinson spoke on becoming a wealthy speaker at your event last year. There's a topic that segues to her message that might be a great way to continue the conversation for your audience.
Nice.
So you don't have to say I. I mean,
Okay.
the I challenge is the more you
It's
start
hard.
practicing it, it's actually at first, and then once you get into it, you start getting all these messages from people with all these eyes, and it looks very junior, and it says it's all about them, and you can pretty much never say I if you really restructure the way you're speaking.
Wow. Okay. And can we just say that we're not trying to make anybody feel bad if you've been doing it in a way that might not be perfect. When you know better, you do better. And my goal for this podcast is never ever for somebody to feel bad about the way they've been doing something. So let's just say that, okay? That's not the goal. It's just that now we're going to hopefully have you thinking about it a little bit differently. Cool?
Yeah, and I love that perspective because sometimes it's hard to look at it from the other side of the table.
Hmm.
And like I said, I was a sales rep for 10 years and I cringe when I think about the messaging and the voicemail, and so
Yeah.
it's interesting and that's why these types of conversations, whether you're listening to it, I mean, I listen to podcasts all the time and these types of ideas constantly at first you're like, oh my gosh, am I doing that? And then right after, it's like, well, cool. Now that I'm aware of it,
Right.
how can I be better? And it's really, it's a great way to approach becoming better, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, good. You've covered personal. You segued beautifully into useful. That was well done. Now let's talk about the B, P-U-B. The B is for brief.
brief, 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 brief. We are in an age of emoticons and GIFs and memes and stories, and we just don't read like we used to. None of us do. And so, if you're trying to attract attention, whether it's to a meeting planner, an event organizer, just by making your message 2 to 3 sentences, you will stand out from everyone else that is blasting people with 2 to 3 paragraphs, like you said, the show up and throw up.
Mm.
So just if you ever open a message, like I get messages all day long, and you open them up, and before you even read the words, all you see are those paragraphs. And visually, you're
Yeah,
already kind of checking out.
checked out.
And so if you think about the goal with these messages is not to educate someone from start to finish on who you are. Because the goal of social and digital is not to sell someone from behind the screen. The goal is to persuade someone to hop on a phone call with you or hop on a video conference call, or if you're local, grab a cup of coffee, because like people are craving in-person connections more than ever. That's why the event industry is still growing, because people crave, in the world of digital, they crave real relationships. They want to, whether it's on FaceTime or Skype or Facebook Live, people want to connect with people in a very real and tangible way. And the idea of using this messaging on digital, whether you're typing, texting, or tweeting, is to entice someone enough to get them to listen to you over everybody else, which is very challenging, and then to get them to agree to have a conversation about them and their needs. And so what I recommend is being brief can either be 2 or 3 sentences that's enough to entice them into checking out your profile or into saying, I'm interested, I want to learn more. You will stand out by just sheer brevity of your message. Number 2 is the fact that being brief also means showing, not telling. Oftentimes, just sending an image or a visual or a short video can be much more helpful than talking and talking and talking, because, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And trying to explain all these things, why are we trying to tell when today with our cameras, we're all sitting here, the camera's like the new keyboard. I mean, you basically can show anything without having to explain. So I really recommend super brief for a lot of reasons. And the final point on brief would be the fact that this is very controversial. People don't always agree with me on this, but I recommend, if you want to be really different in your communications, which being different is persuasive, it's interesting, right?
Right.
You really want to be different, eradicate the ask. Like, take away.
No call to action.
I have tested calls to action versus non-call to action.
Okay.
And the challenge with calls to action is that everyone is asking for action.
Right.
Everyone's asking for 5 minutes. Everyone's asking for, please check this out. People are asking and asking and asking. So when you come in with a message that's highly personal, highly useful, and highly brief, and you just leave it at that, my profile views back from those types of messaging, my responses back from those types of emails are 3 and 4x, because it's so different. I gave something helpful or something interesting, and now basic human psychology of reciprocity, now they're like, well, what's the catch? She didn't ask for anything. She didn't beg for time or attention or money. Like, they're like interested. You're attracting them.
They're more intrigued than ever.
Yeah,
so your final line would be, what would be the final sentence in something like that?
So I typically just do 2 sentences. My first sentence is something highly personal about the person.
Okay.
My second sentence is something highly useful. And my third sentence, I just say, cheers, Erin.
I love it.
It sounds like
counterintuitive.
It sounds so basic, yes. But because it's so different from like what you were saying, what everyone else is doing, it works and it's persuasive and it's interesting. And it's really hard to be simple. Like those two sentences take you a while to craft. I mean, it's definitely a quality over quantity outreach strategy,
right,
where I'd rather hit 5 people that become meaningful long-time relationships, which they do, rather than 30, 40, or 50 people, and I just go right into the spam folder,
I love
you
it.
know?
You're really making me think about things differently. And boy, the I principle is something that I'm going to need to work on for sure. You're like a breath of fresh air. And so I love that you're coming at things from just different perspectives. The other thing you've made me really think about is the visuals. So we're going to talk about the trends and what you see the hottest things are right now and maybe coming down the pike. Talk about visuals, how Instagram is blowing up, etc.
Okay, so you and I have talked a lot about visuals in the last couple of weeks, and just to understand the psychology behind why emoticons and Instagram and Pinterest and these highly visual mediums are just taking off. It's again because we're being so blasted from all sides with so much content every day. Our brains are literally trying to keep us afloat. And so we just can't process all this. We just can't. And so when you think about a picture being worth 1,000 words, our brain can process the meaning of an image or a visual so much faster than having to read all those words. I mean, you show one gorgeous image and there's so much emotion and feeling, you get it. That might take paragraphs to explain what was happening there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so addictive. That's why emoticons have taken off. I mean, you can have full conversations with emoticons.
I don't know if I want to, though. I'm going to be honest with you. I feel like it's not for me. I'm not a millennial. I don't think in emoticons, I feel like you're showing me the path, but there are going to be things that I just say, no, I'm never going to speak in full sentences in emoticons. That's okay, isn't it? It's just not my
That's totally
style.
okay. Totally. And
Please
that's the
don't make
thing.
me do that, Erin.
No, well, there's no making. That's the thing. It's everyone should do what works for them.
Yeah.
It's just, it's everyone do you. Like my favorite phrase of all time is "do you."
Okay.
And you can't go wrong if you do you.
All right. Fair
So
enough.
I will not text you any emoticons. I'll try to be
It's not
a
that I
little
mind receiving
aware.
them. I just don't want to, I don't want to speak in full sentences. That's not going to be, I am already a very brief, sparse writer
Yeah.
and speaker. So I'm paring it down that way, but it takes me too long to even try to think of emoticons. So that's why I don't do it, is because it's more time consuming for me. But somebody like you who's been trained in it from an early age, it's no big deal. Okay. Talk about stories in Instagram.
So, well, before I go to stories, one last thing though, because you actually are very digitally savvy, and you have kind of a millennial mindset in a lot of ways, in a positive way, because you don't like talking on the phone, which is very millennial, right? Isn't that right? Don't you like just texting? You prefer
I
text?
would much prefer emailing, hearing a first conversation with a client. I prefer to have by email so that I can lay out the plan for them and the first steps, and because it's always typically the same. So
Right.
then I move into phone. So I do get on the phone and Skype with everybody eventually, but it's just at what point of the conversation. And yeah, I don't think though. I mean, how many decision makers nowadays? They maybe do everything by text and email, and maybe they don't even want to talk to you on the phone. And I think that's really difficult for some of the people who've been around for a long time and are really used to talking to people.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it's funny. It can be generational. It can be, the boomers. It can be the Xers. It can be millennials. But a lot of people, even if they aren't digital natives, that millennial mindset, it's really more of like a mentality of how you
Hmm.
approach new technologies. I mean, my mother-in-law is 74,
Hmm.
and she knows how to do anything you throw at her. She has her apps, she does her Ubers, she does
I love it.
emoticons. So I just think it's kind of more of a personality thing, like whatever,
Yeah,
like do you, like we said earlier, right?
exactly.
But so if you don't like emoticons, Jean, you're
All
not going to
right.
love the stories trend, okay? Because
All
the
right.
stories trend is very, very visual. So here's the concept. The concept of what I think is probably the largest overarching social media trend of 2017 is stories. Instagram stories, Facebook stories, and the originator, Snapchat stories.
Mhm.
Okay. So for the last 10 years, we have been in a very tech-centric vertical news feed format. Because when social media came out 10 years-ish ago, most of us were consuming that type of content on our desktops. So that visual news feed format worked really well. Well, now 75% of social media content is now consumed from mobile. And mobile is not a native experience for that vertical newsfeed. What is a native experience is creating quick stories that are in a chronological format. Okay. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you're at an event, like let's say we're at Influence in
Mhm.
July, which I'm so excited to go to. So we're going to be there. And if you were uploading photos to your Facebook newsfeed, you would be uploading, like I would look through Facebook and I would see, oh, here's Jane, arriving at Influence. And then a couple posts later, maybe like 20 posts down, I'd say, oh, and then Jane did her speech. And then now I'm back to Carolyn. And now I'm back to, Pamela. And now I'm looking at Elaine. Oh, and then there's Jane, oh, at her fun event. Like it's these segmented stories that are they're not really chronological. It's like these chunks that are kind of throughout the news feed.
Mhm.
And depending on what Facebook decides to serve you, it may or may not even be that chronological. Facebook might decide to show you something that happened 3 days ago first because it had more engagement. So it's not a true chronological experience of this 24/7 narrative. Okay. So if you look at the stories format, where you are knitting together quick moments of your day that disappear within 24 hours, it's basically checking every metric of the most highly sticky social media content format you can imagine. Number one, because it disappears in 24 hours, it makes it must-see content. It is you have to look at it now because otherwise it goes away, right?
Right.
Number two, because the camera is the new keyboard, you are able to snap all of these moments and knit them together in this truly real time immersive narrative that allows someone to see and experience basically your entire day without words. So it makes it easier for your audience to understand Jane's day at Influence,
Mhm.
but it also makes it easier for Jane because now Jane doesn't have to like think of all these captions and all these words and it takes that pressure off of like, is this the perfect post for my Instagram feed? Like, is it the perfect filter with the perfect smile with the perfect caption? Like, that's so much pressure, especially as brands get so good now at creating incredible content. The bar is raised. So a lot of millennials, especially, are like, you know what? I'm not going to compete with that. I'm just going to go with a bunch of real time, authentic, raw, stripped down moments. This is what my day was like. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. It's not perfect, but it's real.
Mm.
And that's what's so sticky and that's what's so engaging.
So, for those of you who may not know, these stories are the little circles are at the very top of your Instagram feed, and they do cycle in. You'll see that there's some days there's only three, some days there's 10, depending on how many people you're following.
Mhm.
And the way to make them, what would you suggest? Just Googling how to do that? Make a
Yes.
story on Instagram, and somebody will walk you through it.
Yep, it's really, really simple. You
Yeah.
just you click your little camera and then it pops right up. You just can either take a
Walk through
picture
the
by
steps. Yep.
yeah, or you can hold it down. But the idea is that you really want to, as a speaker, it's such a great opportunity because obviously video is the most powerful way for people to understand what you're about as a speaker.
Mhm.
It enables them to see who you are, your personality, and now you don't have to have all this pressure of these perfectly produced video with this perfect camera and perfect background. You can really like basically show people what you're about
Right.
any day, anytime on any topic.
Which is circling back to the beginning, which is why I didn't care that I didn't have hair and makeup done for my
Yeah,
interview, because that's kind of
exactly.
how you get me. Talk about Facebook Live. I know it doesn't seem like Periscope is kind of a thing anymore. Am I wrong about that?
Periscope is kind of donezo, but Facebook Live is really cool. I mean,
Okay.
talk about for our industry especially.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with a lot of, my agency is called Socialite, and we do social media for large conferences and events all over the world. And Facebook Live is the number one most powerful shift that we've seen in the way that events can really amplify their experiences and really put that microphone and spotlight around what's happening in real time. So Facebook Live is really cool for a lot of reasons, but number one, it eliminates a lot of the headaches and the bugs of live streaming, which has had a very kind of choppy history throughout the trade shows and convention spaces. So with Facebook Live, you're able to promote that you're going to be live. You're able to have people tune in. And the best part is that when you're using Facebook Live at an event, your audience can help co-create the broadcast with you. So they're able to ask Jane a question in real time or message Jane, oh, Jane, what is that? What was that booth you just walked by? Or, oh, who are you just talking to? Or people can feel like they're actually with you at the event. And you can tailor your broadcast in real time by pivoting to what your audience is expressing interest in. So again, like you were saying earlier, all of these movements are mapping back to the audience. It's all about your audience. And so with Facebook Live, if you have a broadcast and let's say people don't tune in real time and they miss it for whatever reason, the really cool thing is you can archive your broadcasts immediately. And as you guys probably know, Facebook is a pay to play. It's not really an earned medium anymore. It's more of a paid platform.
Right.
So if you don't pay to promote your posts, most of your audience doesn't really see it anyway. So you can now promote your broadcasts. And what we've seen from running these campaigns for dozens of trade shows is that the archived version of the Facebook Live broadcast
gets a lot
continue to get engagement and continue to have legs for weeks and weeks after the shows and after the events, which talk about a meeting planner's dream to give legs to the event even after it's finished and have it live on among the audience in the discussion in the comments. I mean, it's huge. It's a game changer.
So if they want to keep it to members only, then you'll probably have to think about how you do that. What about kind of a presentation? What length? Give me some parameters around Facebook Live. What do you think is kind of the sweet spot there in terms of how long are these broadcasts?
So a minimum Facebook Live, you definitely want to be at least 10 minutes.
Okay.
And so this is, as a speaker, why it's really important to, if you can, have that person on either your team or, in my case, a lot of times my husband will come with me and do it for me.
Nice.
But to have a buddy that can broadcast what you're doing, because you can promote that you're going to be on Facebook Live on your social networks. You can start to stream live from the event, but also the event planners and meeting planners are starting to wise up to this tool.
Mm-hmm.
So they can start broadcasting what you're doing. And it can be anywhere, to answer your question. I mean, you can do, 10 minutes is a minimum. But really what you want to do is broadcast long enough that you actually do have some dialogue and some engagement happening in real time so that it feels like this second screen experience that they're actually engaging with.
So you're engaging with the people who aren't in the room. You're engaging with the people who are commenting or what have you on the live stream. And I spoke at Influence a couple of years ago as well, and we tried to live stream it. We did live stream it, but I will apologize to anybody who was listening at home because I did a very, very poor job. I find, Erin, that it's all I can do to string a thought together from beginning to end sometimes. So in these live mediums, when there's hearts flying at you and all of these things, I don't have the attention span for that. So it is really good to have a buddy kind of managing those types of things, and you can maybe have that person be the conduit to help you answer some of the things that are being asked from home. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. And the thing is that a lot of times the goal is not that, Jane, that you have to one-to-one engage with all these people, because that's not scalable, right? Because you're a rock star, and eventually as your social media continues to grow, it's already grown so much, you're not going to be able to, you're going to be on like Tony Robbins level. You're not going to be able to answer 3,000 comments. But the goal is that you're not necessarily responsible for being, this one-to-one communicator. You're hosting the party. Okay. You're the platform. And so the people that are engaging around your content, they begin having a dialogue with each other.
Okay.
Like that's the ultimate, right? Is that you've sparked conversation and connected people with each other around this topic, around this event. Because one of the big metrics that we have in the social media world for events, when we do these large trade shows and these large conferences, I mean, most of the events we run social media for are 50, 60,000 attendees. And one of our big metrics that we do for social media is we call it our FOMO metric, fear of missing out.
Right.
How many comments were there on social media about, wow, this event looks crazy. I wish I was there this year. I can't believe we missed it. We got to go next year.
Right.
That to us is then.
Okay, so FOMO is the way for me to convince NSA to let us do a Facebook Live broadcast if they're not on board with it. That's how I'm gonna position
Exactly.
it. Well, thank you for your inspiration about me being the next Tony Robbins. That's a good one. I appreciate that. You know, I am hoping anybody who is going to Influence 17, that is the National Speakers Association conference this summer. I'm going to be there doing a session. Erin's going to be there doing a session. I think you're going to want to go and get more of the amazing things that she brings to the table. And I would just like to say, Erin, thank you for doing this. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, what would you say is the best way for them to do that? We'll put this in the show links.
So my website is www.eringargan, ERINGARGAN.com.
All right. Well, Erin, is there anything else that we really must say before we sign off for today about getting more bookings using focused and intentional social media?
I think we covered it. Personal, useful, brief, and then be yourself.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's what I'm doing anyway. So
well, with that, we shall say, see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks for being here, Erin.
Thanks, Jane. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speakers Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, wealthy speakers.